Hello and welcome to The Actor and the Engineer. My name is Paul James. I am the actor.
My name is Josh Knapp. I'm the broadcast engineer.
Buckle up, Josh. Here we go.
I know.
It's been a while.
I feel like every time we get back into this, it's been so long since we've had a recording. And guess what? It's been so long since we've had a recording. But I mean, we definitely want to get into the movie that we're going to be talking about today, Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon. But before that, we got a couple of things that we wanted to kind of go over. I mean, since our last recording, our country's been going through a lot, motivated by the haunting murder of George Floyd by a Minneapolis police officer. Across the country, there's been a bunch of protests against police brutality of African American and other minority groups. Other protests have happened in the past, but this particular incident and subsequent demonstration are potentially spurring positive change in the communities around the country. This podcast is not a political one, but we do keep current events in mind when we talk about movies, and we strive to have an open and honest and hopefully engaging discussion on whatever we're talking about with respect to the creators of a film and the characters in those films. But we also understand that there's times to talk and times to listen. And right now, it's our time to listen. So that being said, we're going to move forward to some other information that's come down very recently. We've got the Oscars have just been postponed from late February to, or I guess mid-February to April 25th. And so I know it's happened in the past for various reasons, but it hasn't happened recently. So they're moving back a few months. And so that's going to open up space for, I guess, more movies to open up wide through theatrical release and to be available for Oscars. And they also locked in 10 Best Picture nominations, which I thought was interesting. So I think that'll be easier for everybody.
What took them so long? It's always been anywhere from 5 to 10. Why not 10? Come on, just put the films in there that, there's a lot of reasons why people like movies. There can be a variety of different reasons. Just because it's an action-packed blockbuster does not mean it doesn't have a quality that deserves to be recognized by the Academy, whatever that may be, whatever genre that may be. And they have been expanding it recently to other films, but why not 10? Why not make it 10? And they're debating now about inclusive contracts where if your film has a certain amount of diversity in it, working on it in the film, then it can qualify. Mm-hmm. And I like that because what that does is it opens it up to other filmmakers who might not be getting recognized by the Academy. And, it's good that we set out these rules and regulations that benefit people by opening it up. So I think it's great. They're also going to do streaming films that weren't able to get theatrical release, but that's for a 1-year only term. They're not going to consider that next year. Hopefully they don't have to consider it next year. Hopefully we will have a vaccine and we will be able to go to the movies without worrying about this kind of stuff.
So like King of Staten Island, would that be one of the ones that would be okay? Yeah, because that just came out and it's not going to be in the theaters.
Right, correct. And they're calling it one of the best of the year. I haven't seen it yet, but there's something about it that strikes me as one of those films like Superbad. Yeah, where you're expecting one thing and then you get a whole set of other things going on. And I'm excited about that. Yeah. So they backed up the Academy Awards before, but I like the idea that they're going ahead and backing it up far enough to where people can still get their films out. Now it's going to be a bum rush to get these films out so everybody can see them to qualify by this point in time. My concern would be something unforeseen like, God forbid, a second wave of coronavirus. God forbid more people getting sick. Mm-hmm. I'm wondering, are they ever going to be able to open it up to the public without a vaccine? Because I know for myself, I'm not taking my father to the movies anytime soon. He's 83 and I'm still in one of the very low phases of this whole thing. I have not had to go out as much as you do and as much as your wife does. And it's been under the guise of protecting my father. And sure, we'll go ahead, wink, wink, say that's the reason why. But I'm telling you, when I go into the supermarket or I went to the doctor's office today, I was like, I was so stressed. I can't imagine enjoying a film knowing I'm always looking over my shoulder. So hopefully by this point in the year that things have been worked out, I hope, and we can enjoy a film. And then the extension is not that big of a deal. They did the right thing.
Yeah, well, and also the technology now, even compared to 10 years ago, is so much different to where people have less and less reasons to go out to the theater as far as content is concerned. Number one, there's so much content. Number two, you can see a brand new movie in your own home. King of Staten Island, that's an example. I mean, or even what they did with Invisible Man and some of the other movies, the Trolls World Tour thing, all that stuff, they can facilitate that now a lot easier. You still need, a broadband internet connection pretty much, unless you want to deal with buffering and all that stuff. But still, it's so much easier now than it was. The problem is I don't think that there's going to be enough money associated with the receipts of those movies to have the same level of production value or budget, I guess, for a lot of movies. Like I couldn't imagine Top Gun Maverick coming out, or even, I mean, more recently, the Tenet just got moved back 2 weeks because even though Christopher Nolan really wants this movie to be out in the theater because he is a huge proponent of the theater going experience, he still understands that if there are no theaters to play them in, it's not going to be worth it for Warner Brothers. They're not going to be able to recoup their money. So that's the difficult position they're in. But that was my main question for you was something like Tenet, July 31st, are you going to be in the front row, or, are you going to be sitting in a theater on July 31st for Tenet?
Okay, this is the first time in a long time that we can see each other because the past couple of recordings, I was quarantined in Maryland. Look into my eyes. Is there anything in what I just said that gives you an indication I'm going to go to the theater on July? Yes, if there's a vaccine, sure.
Well, yeah, that's not going to happen.
I will not be able to, even if they sterilize the place, even if I go through the ET plastic tubes, even if I'm like the boy in the plastic bubble, my concern is not necessarily for myself. My concern is bringing it home.
Yeah.
And I can't foresee relaxing watching a movie, although that movie probably will be great in the theater. It's probably visually stunning. I can't imagine ever feeling completely relaxed to give myself over to the wonderful suspension of disbelief that I have. I cannot see myself not. And if I thought that was going to add to the experience, I might consider it. It's like when I went to see Hereditary and I actually thought that there was like some psycho in the theater, and I kept looking over my shoulder and down the aisle and, underneath the stairs and stuff like that, because I thought if there's ever a time to like do something to somebody, this would be a murder fest in this movie. And of course, that's just my crazy imagination, but it added to the suspense of the film. There's nothing about this pandemic that would add to the film. So no, As for your first thought about budgets and making these type of big movies, maybe that's a good thing because it only costs $4 million to make Moonlight, and look what we got. So maybe not spending a whole lot of money might be a new phase for Hollywood, at least for the time being. They have to adapt.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
I get what you're saying. And, will we be able to have these big budgeted films if people are not paying big budgeted film prices to go? And the theater owners can't sell a bunch of popcorn to make up, for having to show these films. Maybe that's not where this world should be right now.
Yeah.
Maybe the next phase is these smaller films where there's like some poor director on the side of the street going, just give me $2 million. I got this great idea. And next thing you know, it's, the next Parasite. There are small films that have been spectacular.
Parasite was a pretty big film, though.
Yeah,
got to give it up. You can't lump Parasite in with small films. It was a pretty big budget movie.
You're right.
For South Korea specifically.
But maybe there's somebody who has that kind of idea, but can't get the $5 million to make it because somebody's giving Christopher Nolan $250 million.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Not that I wouldn't if I had it, and not that Christopher Nolan doesn't deserve it. He deserves it. Maybe just like we had to adapt from drive-ins to multiplexes. Maybe we adapted from that to VHS to DVDs, DVDs to streaming. We adapt, and the art comes through, and the struggle is what creates great art.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see what comes out of all this, and just like the first few movies to be made within this period of time will be really interesting too. Do they utilize that for storytelling purposes, or do they just kind of like act like nothing's ever happened? So it'll be
I'm
crazy.
sure we're going to get the best of the both worlds. Do you know that the Jurassic Park film, or the new Jurassic Dominance, what is the
Dominion?
Dominance, Dominion, same thing. I don't know why I just said it like that. I don't mean any disrespect to that franchise. I enjoy that franchise.
More than I do, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right. They're going back into production. We'll see.
They have rules. They have, in fact, I read all their rules where they've got a whole nother department now that there's people that are associated with individual like zones. I guess there's zone A, which has the actors, and there's zone B, which is people who don't interact with the actors, because the actors can't be 6 feet apart from each other. That's just not going to work. What if you've got a love scene? You can't be 6 feet apart from the other person. It would be really awkward. So but anyway, so that they have different ways of kind of trying to deal with that, but everybody else is going to have to be 6 feet apart and going to have to wear masks and all that stuff. And they're going to be tested 3 times a week. And it's just, they're just trying to feed their families, it's the hard part. That's the hard part.
See, that to me is way more interesting than the first part of this conversation. How they're going to figure that out is way more interesting than what the Academy figured out and what the world is figuring out about going back to movies. Going back to work in an intimate working environment is perplexing to me. Yeah. I have no idea what I would do. Yeah. No idea maybe my life would be in a different place, but it's one of those things. It's hard to think past it for me.
Yeah.
That's just where I'm at.
Yeah, I don't know. I have a little bit of a different look for it because I haven't been quarantined. I've been, out every day essentially going to work, but at the same time you might think that would make me feel emboldened to be like, I haven't gotten it yet and I've been, at work all the time. But I mean, both Steph and I try to be really careful, and so it's one of those things where it's like I'm still not like I'm gonna be first in line for tickets to Tenet, So let's start talking about the movie that I asked you if you wanted to watch. Good God, 2 months ago. I don't know. It's been so long since we talked about this movie initially, and we thought, we need to just, barrel through and talk about this movie. I found this movie. It was just a rental a long time ago, back when it came out in 2006 or probably 2007. When I saw it, it's a film called Behind the Mask: The Rise of Leslie Vernon. So it is not a big budget movie. It's an independent film done by kind of like a director, writer, and his writing partner, and it's a mockumentary, you could say, documentary, but it's about it's a documentary crew that's following a prospective serial killer in the vein of Freddy or Michael Myers or Jason Voorhees. And they all live in this world where all of those people actually do exist. So that kind of gives you a framing device for this, but it's kind of like it's not edited in the way that a traditional documentary would be edited. It's kind of like a rough edit of a documentary where you kind of get to see a little bit of behind the scenes of the documentary crew, them interacting with each other, and also them interacting with their main subject, whose name in the movie is Leslie Vernon. That's the starting point of the film, and it kind of goes through a few different things and morphs and changes as the film goes on. And it was infinitely interesting to me. And I asked you if you'd seen it, and you said no. So I thought this would be a good excuse for you to see it. So what did you think about the movie?
Well, first of all, I have to say I'm impressed with myself because let me take a self-congratulations pat on my back here. These are not my things. Mockumentaries, they're not my thing. They don't call to me. Mm-hmm. Certain types of humor, it doesn't call to me. This is why I was patting myself on the back, because I have a really good ability to not stop myself and cut myself off from something because it doesn't call to me. I don't immediately say I don't like something because it's not part of it doesn't spark my interest immediately. That said, I do love all of those, The Mighty Winds, Waiting for Guffman, Best in Show, Spinal Tap. I do love all the Christopher Guest stuff. Yeah, he's I almost cussed. He is funny.
Yeah.
And I loved Monty Python when I was growing up, which was odd to my family. So there is a sense of humor that this film falls into that I think is funny. And I laughed out loud quite a few times during this film. I got a lot of the references because I know all these movies. So I was actually pretty proud of myself that I didn't kind of be like, turn my nose up to it. This is not my thing. I get it. I don't know why these things don't call to me. It's like Westerns don't call to me.
Me either.
But when I see them, I'm like, wow, this is really great. Jane Austen, I've probably seen a million of her books turned into movies, but it doesn't call to me. It's not like if it's a particular cast member or an actor that I like, maybe that's the reason why I turn it on. A lot of the times I turn those on because people talk about those films and they get Oscar nominations and people love those books and love those movies. And I want to know why people are so attracted to those things. Once I watch it, I'm like, wow, that was really great. Like the Keira Knightley, Pride and Prejudice. I had absolutely no desire to see that. Not that because I thought it was going to be bad or anything, but just no desire. Then I saw it and I was like, oh my God, she's really great in this and it's really well done. So same thing happens with these type of films. 5 minutes into it, you adjust to it and you get what they're doing and you go with the flow of it. And then there's all these moments where if you know these slasher films, that they're not only celebrating them, they're kind of making fun of them and it's a little tongue in cheek. And it's always really fun to see something like when he goes to, what's the actor's name? Scott Wilson, Eugene, when he goes to Eugene and his wife's house.
Yeah.
And it's like a family reunion
Yep.
of serial killers
and he's such a nice old man.
Yeah, that he aspires to.
He's got a hot
and then
wife.
The wife and the wife at the end, she's like, that's my idea. That was my idea. Jeez. And it's really a sinister idea that she has. It's really sick. So you can't not laugh. So I enjoyed it for what it was. I can't say anything bad about it because you take it for what it is. And I actually think that they proved a theory of mine about being an actor. I've often said, and this isn't my quote, it's somebody else's quote, there's no small parts, only small actors. Well, that means that you play your part the best that you possibly can, regardless of how big it is or how small it is or how important it is to the script or to the actual production. You play it to your best of your ability, and they hunker down, all of them. Mm-hmm. Now, there is a little bit of, what's the lead character's name? Oh, Leslie. How do you say his last name? Nathan?
Basil?
Basil. That AE combination looks strange to me.
Yeah.
Anyway, you can tell he's got a little bit more of a firm tongue in his cheek as an actor than a lot of the other ones, but they take it seriously and they commit to it. And I don't know, it works. I enjoyed it. I had a good time watching it.
Yeah. And I think that for me, what I loved about this movie is at least I keep coming back to all the time is that good movies have a good command on tone. And I think in comedies, you have the ability to kind of like mess around with tone. You have a little bit more leeway. And so this movie really ingratiates you to someone who says he's going to go kill a bunch of high schoolers. You know, that's the whole point of the movie is he's setting up for this kind of massacre at this old abandoned house, and they're watching him prepare for all this, whether it's setting up booby traps in the house or setting up, axes and things in a back room, or even just working out, like even just like punching a punching bag, because you got to have good cardio, So it ingratiates you to that character as an audience member, and we become complicit in what he's doing, and so does the documentary crew. So just the fact that you change the point of view from like a third party camera that is looking at all the characters to a camera that's being held by one of the characters and someone speaking from behind that. I mean, I know for whatever reason, a lot of people don't like Cloverfield, but I liked that movie. But just the fact that TJ Miller's behind that camera talking and you never even see him in that movie, it brings you into that movie a lot more. It envelops you a lot more in that movie. And I think that these movies definitely do that. And what really locks you into that is there's a few scenes, even right off the bat at the beginning of the movie, where we're not using that digital camera. We're not using the documentarian footage. It is a stylized. I think it's shot on film too. There's those certain scenes, especially the scenes with the final girl at the beginning. She's coming out and throwing away the trash, and then especially when she's in the library and kind of finding these little breadcrumb clues that he drops for her, and the tone totally shifts in the movie, and we go from little Super 8 cameras to what looks to be film on a huge crane that comes down, and then it pushes in, and you've got a score behind it, and it becomes a horror movie. I mean, it just is a straight up horror movie for that 5 minutes, and then it goes back to our documentary crew and all that stuff. And I thought it's really neat to be able to play with the audience like that, to differentiate between this guy who you saw who he introduced you to his pet turtles, and now he's menacing this woman, and it's just like he's not really at the beginning of the movie, he's not really doing anything to her. He's just kind of scaring her a bit, and so we get to see the eventuality of that as the film progresses. So we're not getting any spoilers yet, but that was the thing, at least the first half of the movie, that was the thing that kind of like grabbed me, and I really enjoyed that. And also the references and the characters in there. I mean, you got Robert Englund is in this movie, and he shows up a couple times, just a couple times, but when he shows up, you're like, oh my gosh, that's Freddy. That's the actor who played Freddy. And his name is even Doc Halloran, which is a reference to The Shining, because Dick Halloran is Scatman Crothers in The Shining. So, and he calls the kid Doc. So it's just like, and then I think he's the Robert Englund character in this movie is meant to be like, what's his name? Loomis in Halloween. Yeah. So, I mean, that's I don't know. It's just, it's obviously made by people who are fans of horror and also understand the kind of the over the top things that you have to believe when watching a horror movie, or the kind of leaps you have to make as a moviegoer when watching a horror movie. And it really kind of either at the beginning kind of turns them on their head and makes it points out those flaws, much like a Monty Python sketch would, or like we've talked about, that type of humor. I think it's like British humor is very kind of, dry or tongue in cheek, or it'll flip something around in a novel way that you're like, oh man, I didn't even think about how stupid this whole framework is until they made an opposite of it. And you look at it and you're like, this is stupid. Doesn't matter what it is, but that is just a better way of understanding the absurdity of certain things by just flipping them over. So I don't know. I thought that all of that was great.
The one thing I did want to say, following what you were just talking about, is that the filmmakers and the screenwriters took their time to sit down and say, well, why do they always show up at the library or show up at their work and hide behind the bushes? Why do the killers do that? We've just accepted that that's part of the tropes of these horror films, but to actually come up with an explanation and it be part of this guy's world, and it almost be a case study of how you're supposed to do this in order to get it right. And he actually says if he doesn't do certain things in certain orders, then certain things don't happen, and that makes it wrong. You're messing with the schedule, he says to her at one point. I'm running behind. He looks at his watch, or he says something along that lines. And I think it's clever that you're right. We are in a world nowadays where everything is flipped on its side, and people go, well, wait a second. I saw something about Harry Potter on Facebook, and they were talking about this and that, and Dumbledore being the biggest jerk in the world because of what he sets Harry Potter up to be, and so forth and so on. And then they listed all these reasons why Dumbledore is such a jerk. And I was like, I never even thought about that, but that's kind of a jerk move, man. It's not right. I love Dumbledore. Don't get me wrong. I love Dumbledore. Yeah. But so we're living in that world where things are definitely pulled apart and examined, and you go, wait a second. Why did Rose survive and not Leonardo DiCaprio. That door was big enough for both of them.
That's right.
You know, it's, you know, come on, why? And why didn't anybody, when making that film, really think about that? And the fact that it still haunts them to this day, because it came up during an interview with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood when Margot Robbie turns to Leonardo and goes, "What's up with that? Why weren't you on that door?" And he's like, you know, I have my theories, basically. And he very much Leo'd it. And Brad Pitt's like, yeah, what's up with that?
Yeah.
And so they got a big kick out of it because now we are able to, with the internet and with streaming and with phones, just pick things apart because we have the time for it.
Yeah.
We can watch it over and over again. So to actually go in and write a horror film in this kind of genre, mockumentary, for lack of a better term, but to actually explain why he's doing what he's doing, I thought that was kind of clever. I thought it was well thought out.
Yeah.
Because why do they always end up in an old abandoned house with two stoners and a virgin? And why is there always a virgin? Like, why is that?
Yeah, I mean, that is like the biggest deal for them, that survivor girl or final girl, as it's called in some things. And you're right, they're always the virgin. I mean, it goes back to, I mean, I don't know if it goes back to Halloween, but it's definitely a part of Halloween where Laurie is being the responsible girl who's babysitting and staying home, whereas her friends are going out and having all kinds of sex and everything, and they're the ones who die and she doesn't. You know, that, in fact, there's even a movie I watched. It was okay. It was pretty I don't know, it's pretty corny, but it's called The Final Girl or The Final Girls, I think. And it was just okay. But it was based on that premise. But anyway, I did want to bring up, before we get into spoilers, the fact that this movie is on Amazon Prime right now. So if you have Amazon Prime, you can watch it. And there's another movie that I watched just recently. It's been a long time since I've seen it, and I didn't realize how stark the movie was. And it's a Belgian film called Man Bites Dog. So it's very similar, eerily similar as far as the subject matter is concerned. It's a film crew, 3 guys following around a serial killer, and it makes no bones about it. From the very beginning, the first scene of the movie is them filming the main subject killing someone. That is the first thing you see, and there's no score or anything like that, but you find out very quickly that the main subject he's gregarious and he's talkative and he's personable and he laughs. And within the first 15 minutes of the movie, you actually get to meet his family, and his family are sweet. They own like a corner shop, and you know they have no idea that he does what he does, but they're just it's a humanization of a person who is inhuman, who is causing destruction. And the fact that you're seeing this makes you, like we said earlier, makes you complicit in this person's actions. And obviously it makes the documentarians complicit in it, but it makes you as an audience member complicit in it. And the fact that you're kind of going back and forth between oh, what he said was funny, or, oh, well, it's just a bunch of guys just hanging out. But always in the back is that specter of, who's he going to kill next? And then also on top of that is, and you see it in this movie Behind the Mask too, on top of that is, what is the level of danger that the documentarians are in? At what point do they move from being a friend to a potential foe? At one point do they move from, being someone who is beneficial to the serial killer or beneficial to the serial killers? One is a potential serial killer at the beginning of the movie, and the other one is a serial killer at the beginning of the movie. But where's your level of danger throughout the movie? And so there's a constant just kind of dread, and especially in Man Bites Dog, and not as much in Behind the Mask, but it's still there in both. But it's kind of a rough watch. I didn't remember how rough of a watch it was, but it is kind of a watch. There are funny scenes in it, but there's also just some harrowing scenes in it. And it's a hard movie to recommend, actually. But I think that what both of those movies come back to is why are either of these documentary crews making a movie of people like this? Why would you give someone like this a voice? And I think it comes back to you, as you know, in the media, you need to get noticed. And so it's got to be really difficult to have a subject that is interesting enough, but is not detrimental to society to get out there and to get you play or to get you, an audience. So these are extreme examples of a documentary crew or a group bolstering an opinion or a profile of someone who's just an evil person. One of them does it a lot more starkly than the other, but they both are doing it. So I would recommend seeing Behind the Mask because there's a lot in there, but Man Bites Dog, I mean, it's on the Criterion channel right now, so you can stream it, but it's a little rough. So I probably won't see it again for a very long time, and I may never see it again ever. But
I'm scared of it just listening to you talk about it, because if you're like Mr. Midsommar and like, Suspiria and Hereditary, you got a weird sense of like
it's
strangeness, dude. So
yeah, it's shot 16 millimeter, no score, black and white. I mean, it is, when you think about it from a filmmaker standpoint, if you want to make a movie, it's ingenious because they're essentially, there's no real like big special effects or anything like that, but it's just they're making a movie on a cheap budget, and they're just making it work. And like even the scenes that the people that made the movie are all the people who starred in the movie, so the crew was very, very small. It was just those like 4 people, and the scenes where they went and talked to the parents of the serial killer, that was actually that actor's parents. He was one of the directors too, but it was his parents, and they didn't tell them what the movie was about. So they just thought that they were following him around as like a film student, and they were just talking to his parents and like, hey, they have this shop and all this stuff. But it's crazy. But the reactions you get from the parents are genuine, and it makes it that much more visceral to be like, this guy had a loving family. He grew up and became this thing. And it's just, it's crazy. Oh man. We don't get as much of a character development in Behind the Mask as you do in Man Bites Dog, but
that's an easy fix though, because how many character developments do you get in all of those other films? I mean, you don't know anything about Michael Myers. You do to a degree.
Yeah, it's a couple lines.
To a degree.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, you do get something about Freddy.
Jason.
And you do get something about Jason.
By the end of the first one, yeah.
Yeah, kind of. And, and that's never relied on for the rest of them.
Yeah. Well.
They're for 2 through 13 or 14 or whatever.
Jason in Space.
I mean, it's 22. Yeah, Jason in Space, which I think is fine. I'm all about doing as many Alien and Predator movies as you possibly can. I'm all about Freddy and Jason fighting Michael Myers. I'm all about it. Good for you guys. Keep doing it, because I think it's kind of clever. What I find fascinating about what you were just talking about is, where do you draw that fine line between, because you were talking about people who make these documentaries in the guise of these 2 films, Man Bites Dog and Leslie Vernon. Where's the responsibility of the people making the documentary to say, should we be filming a serial killer? Should we be filming a potential serial killer? Where's the ethical line?
Yeah.
But the question does come up to where, if you're documenting somebody's life, and this is somebody's life, who are you to stand and say, of course you would have to stand and say, don't kill that person. Of course. I mean, not.
Yeah. You can save the postman from being killed by just like,
you have to.
Tackling this guy and taking him to jail.
Yeah. And so, spoilers from this point on. So when that does switch in this film, you're like, of course they're going to have to stand their ground and say, we can't let this happen. Of course they're going to do it. She comes across as an ambitious yet naive filmmaker.
Yeah.
So she's trying to do something to, like you were saying, to get your career going and to get your foot in the door and all that other stuff. But then when push comes to shove, she's like, this can't happen. But at the same time, if you take it out of this genre and put it into just documentaries in general, did we need to know Dear Zachary exists? Did we need to be exposed to that?
The family might say yes, but I don't know.
Of course. This is not a question I'm pondering myself. It's a question I ponder about art.
Yeah.
Where is that line? Because if you had told me on any level what that film was about, Dear Zachary, there is no way in hell I would watch it, because it's getting me just thinking about it now. It's mind-blowing. I don't even know the words. I was going to say unexpected, but that's not even a great word to use. It's just like nothing I've ever seen before, and nor do I ever want to see it again.
Mm-hmm.
But where is the responsibility of a person who is making a documentary, especially a person making one documentary that turns into something completely different? And turns, I mean, that movie, Dear Zachary, is not what those filmmakers intended. They even say that. Yeah. They even are like, this is not what we intended. Sorry, hold on. So one could get into a philosophical discussion about where the fine line of art stops and personal responsibility of other human beings start. Of course, you're not going to let somebody kill somebody. You know, that's a snuff film.
Yeah.
That is illegal for a reason. You know, there doesn't even have to be discussed, but it is an interesting conversation. Where does art end, and what is the responsibility of the person who is, one, making the art, and two, one who's just documenting the art? It's an interesting question. I mean, it's too heavy of a question when talking about something like this film, Behind the Mask, because this is obviously a mockumentary and it's obviously tongue-in-cheek. And it's obviously, they're taking it seriously for what it is, like we talked about earlier. But I mean, it's not the same thing. But, you know, one might say, if you were at a party having a couple drinks, well, filming somebody pretending to be a serial killer and putting that out there, isn't that as devastating as actually filming somebody who is? It's not, of course, but
it depends. If you're doing it just for a salacious reaction, then no, that's not responsible. But if you're doing it to comment on the systems that could create a situation like that, then that's when it's a critique as opposed to just like a exploitation.
But who is one to say that one person says that that's salacious and that's not good, but this person is making a comment on the social barriers that put this person into place? We couldn't, as artists, inhibit anybody if they decided to make something salacious. If that's what they decided to do, then I'm not censoring anybody as long as it's not hurting somebody else.
I guess, yeah.
Meaning the creation of that art form. Now, what other people take from that and do to other people is a whole nother subject. I don't think the artist is responsible for reactions to his art or her art. But I'm very cautious about... Can't believe we're getting such a deep conversation over Behind the Mask. I'm very cautious about saying that is gratuitous. It might be a clinical thing where you have to see a woman's breasts. Okay. That's for the art form. But what's wrong with saying, this is not my opinion, but if it was somebody else's opinion, what's wrong with saying, I like to look at women's breasts. I want to see that woman naked in this film because she looks beautiful and it's titillating, and I want to show how this woman is sensual and how her beauty does this to this guy, even though it's gratuitous. Well, I would never say to anybody, that's wrong.
Yeah, I think it depends on what I mean, if you're making pornography, then you don't have to have a reason. It's just pornography. I mean, it is.
Thank God.
but yeah, that's what makes it, that's what differentiates it from art. It would be coming, that nudity would be coming from a character-based motivation, or it'd be coming from a scene-based motivation, or there needs to be a motivation, but just a porno doesn't have to have a motivation. It's just there's just things happening, and they're happening whether the people are invested in it or not, or whether even you're invested in the people there or not. It doesn't matter. So it has a different purpose. Pornography has a different purpose than a narrative film would. I think. I mean, that's my opinion.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I'm just saying that one person's reason for doing something, I will never say that needs to have a narrative and that needs to have character development and that needs to have a reason for you to do it in a film. I'm just never going to say that, because the reason why they want to put it in there is because he's hot and look at his butt. I mean, okay, cool. I've never seen, this guy walking down the beach naked. There's no reason for him to be on a nude beach other than he's hot and that he looks good naked. So why does that have to be part of the narrative? For me personally, I'm on the side of it would be better if it was part of the narrative and it was part of the character development, and that there was a reason why we're seeing him full frontal nude walking down the beach.
For you, is there a difference between good art and bad art, both being art? Could there be a guy walking down the beach nude that's good art and a guy walking down the beach that's bad art for you, based on character motivations?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Everything that Scarlett Johansson does in with the baby crying on the beach.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, Under the Skin.
Under the Skin. Yeah. Everything she does in that is art. Every way they film all of those guys is art. When those guys are walking through that water black thing,
whatever that is,
it's beautiful. And it's beautiful. And they are all full frontal and they are all ready and able, and you see everything. So yes, that is artistically done, but it's also on some level sexually titillating because you have Scarlett Johansson beautifully walking in front of you, and you have male figures who are obviously into her. So it's definitely of a sexual nature, but the reason why it's a sexual nature for the film is completely different than why I might want to watch these guys or Scarlett Johansson naked. Might be two completely different reasons. So yeah, I think that a naked guy walking down the beach can just be a naked guy walking down the beach. Actually, we need more of that for lots of different reasons. But can it be just art? Sure.
Well, yeah, I guess, my question was, can it, you can have good art and you can have bad art, both being art, but I guess what I was doing is I was differentiating that between something that has a different purpose. Like, I just don't feel like pornography for the sake of pornography is necessarily art. So, I mean, you could say that anything is art, I guess, if you wanted to get into that conversation, but I don't even know if the people that create pornography see it as art. Now, maybe they do, maybe they don't. I don't know, but it gets. I don't know, and I'm not a connoisseur of pornography either, so I don't know. Yeah.
We can continue on with the film after this. I think that it goes back to, I've said this a million times before, art is in the eye of the beholder. So if you think that porno is art, then it's art to you. So my definition of what I find that is artful might not be your definition.
Sure.
My point to this whole discussion is that I'm never going to tell you that's not art.
Yeah.
If you find that artful, then it's art to you, because there's such beauty in everything in this world. And beauty doesn't necessarily mean, sunshine and flowers and rainbows and everything beautiful. There's a lot of tragedy in this world that, done in an artful way, is beautiful. Tragic, but beautiful.
Yeah.
That opening sequence in Selma, perfect example, where that church explodes. It's so devastating, but it's done so well. We even commented when we saw that film about how beautiful it was. Hurt Locker. Things blowing up are horrific. People blowing up and losing limbs and extremities is horrific. But in that film, when she shoots that car with the rubble that kind of raises and then lowers as the bomb goes off, it's absolutely stunningly beautiful. Tragic, but beautiful. So my point to that is art is in the eye of the beholder. So if that naked dude walking down the street is artful, especially if it's Brad Pitt, I'm in.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's kind of like me, showing Steph the trailer to Midsommar and being like, hey, what do you think? And her being like, not for me. So for her, Midsommar is not art, but for me, it is.
Well, so there's a whole nother podcast in that. We should actually make her watch that and see what she has to say.
She wouldn't do it. She'd get up and leave. Yeah.
I don't blame her a bit. That sweetheart does not deserve to be into that world. She does not need that in her consciousness.
Probably true.
At all.
So did you see the switch happening? Could you forecast what was going to happen in at the end of Behind the Mask, where it kind of switched over
in
into
reference to Survival Girl?
Yeah, with her being, but mainly like once they get away from the Super 8 footage and they get into the full, like, cinematic portion of the end of the movie.
Well, yes and no. I was going to say it earlier when you were talking about how when they shoot that behind the restaurant scene, how it goes into full-fledged horror film.
Yeah.
It's no longer about them making a documentary. So actually that kind of subconsciously sets you up for the ending.
You're right.
To switch over into. I think if it was a full-fledged kind of point of view documentary from from the beginning until it switches over, it would be jaunting and almost, it's hard to say gimmicky.
It'd be a big leap though. It'd be a big leap to ask the audience to get there.
I would think to myself, I would spend 5 minutes going, why couldn't they make that work? Why did they have to switch it over?
Yeah.
But you've already seen them switch it over. By the way, 2 side notes. I know this is a strange thing, but you know why this movie completely works for me? Because of the actual mask that he wears.
It's so weird. I don't like it.
It's scary.
Yeah.
It's creepy.
Okay.
I think it's creepy, dude.
Yeah.
If I saw a kid walking up to my house on Halloween with that mask on, I would be like, that kid knows something. Give him the large candy bars because that kid knows something. And also, did you see the reference early on in the film with little girls in the First Communion outfits doing the jump rope, like in Freddy?
Oh, okay. Luckily, I've only seen that movie once, and it was a long time ago. I don't ever want to see. I'm not a big Freddy fan.
That movie scared the hell out of me the first time I saw
too.
it. Nightmare on Elm Street scared the hell out of me. I did not enjoy watching that movie the first time. Scared the hell out of me. Well, anyway, there's a lot of these little references. I just thought it was kind of clever that they peppered them in without making it too much like, we're making a movie about how great these films are. They just kind of peppered them in throughout. There's a few references that a lot of people who like horror films will get immediately.
And the guy walking into the Elm Street house is, when she's doing the interview, that's Kane Fodder or whatever his name is. He's the guy who played Jason in a lot of the Friday the 13th movies. So
see, I love that kind of
cool
stuff. Yeah, I wouldn't know that. Well, anyway, the answer to your question is no, it wasn't jarring for me. And yes, I did see it was coming. I knew they were going to play on the virgin thing. I just didn't know how. And then, of course, when she's missing the first girl, I can't think of what her name is. The young girl that he's stalking, or young lady that he's stalking. Yes. So I knew that something was going to twist. I knew there was going to be a twist. There has to be a twist. And when Kelly is missing from that one scene, I was like, uh-oh, Kelly is not who she is presented to be in this film. And then when you see where Kelly really is, you're like, okay, yep. And I'd say about 2 or 3 minutes before that actually happened, I went, they're going to turn this back on Taylor. And something's going to turn where she's going to be the final girl. And there's a brief moment when they talk about the virgin in the film and how he has to go after the virgin. And there's a shot of Taylor and you're like, oh, wait, register that. Oh. Something's going on with that. And so immediately when I find out that Kelly is not who Kelly is, I went, oh, Taylor, she's the virgin. You know, she knows that she put herself into this position being the virgin, thinking probably in the back of her mind once she registered that, well, but Kelly is his victim.
Yeah.
You know? Right. But then when the tides turn and it turns into a real horror film, she of course puts herself in jeopardy. So yeah, I thought it was clever. I thought it was really well done. And I love when they explain something in a film and then they actually let you watch it happen. When they're explaining the whole field and the tunnel and the vaginal walls and the tunnel of birth and all that other stuff, you're like, okay, that's kind of But
it's also Macaulay Culkin. It's Macaulay Culkin putting the micro machines on the floor. You know, it's him setting up the paint cans. It is we're like getting ready for this battle that's about to happen. We know exactly all the pieces that are going to go on, but it makes it satisfying when it actually happens. You know, that's cool.
So the director's name is Scott Glosserman.
Yep.
Yeah.
And he's a co-writer too.
What they did was they took it seriously from that point on. That whole field that she has to go through is creepy as hell looking. That archway is creepy looking. It's done with that like side lighting with the fog coming through the branches of the trees, which is always creepy to me. I don't even like going to Busch Gardens during Halloween because they do that all throughout the forest in Busch Gardens, and that shit is creepy to me. But the point is that they took it seriously, and so you cannot not be satisfied with this film, because even if you rent it going, who is Leslie Vernon? Is he a new villain? Is this a new horror flick? And you're like, oh man, they're making fun of my favorite genre. By the end of the film, they've taken it seriously, and they give you the same satisfying ending to all of these horror flicks that, you know, it's the reason why we watch these movies to begin with. They're celebrating it at the same time they're taking it seriously. And you know what part I loved is when the other young lady who's there, not Kelly, I don't know the other actresses or the other character's name. I think it's after Kelly dies, and they're running around and they go up the ladder, and there's the gratuitous shot of up her skirt. Yep. There's your gratuitous shot, by the way.
That's right. Yeah. They did it twice too. They did it in the, like, him saying what's going to happen, and then they did it again later on when it actually happens.
Yep. And it would not have been satisfying, and I know what word I'm using there, if that had not happened the way that they filmed it, because that's exactly what you're expecting to see. Now, is it gratuitous? Absolutely. Is it necessary? Probably not. But is it fulfilling a part of this type of genre? Yes, absolutely.
The key to that is that when we see it enacted in the first go round, when he's telling the documentary crew what's going to happen, you see it, and then they're in the situation, the documentary crew's in the situation with that girl, and they tell her not to go up there, and they prevent her from going up there. And you're like, okay, so they've thwarted his plan, and everything's not going to go to plan. But then somehow through various machinations, she does end up going up there. So he, you know, it does, like, always come to fruition. His plan will be enacted no matter what. And it doesn't matter what, even them knowing what the plan is. It's like having a playbook for your opponent and knowing every single play they're going to run, and then they still beat you. You know, that's where they're at this movie until the very, very end of the movie. So yeah, I thought that was pretty cool.
Well, the point I was making about bringing her back up again, or bringing her up, is I love the scene where she turns and she goes, what's supposed to happen to me? Tell me, what's going to happen to me? In other words, since these people are versed on this world, she wants to know. And I think that is sort of a genre break. As small as it is, it's the genre break, because she's not just the dumb blonde who's just going up and getting a panty shot. She's actually an intelligent person who is aware of her surroundings and her situation and needs to know. And she knows, she's smart enough to know they know how to survive this. You tell me where my position is. You know, It's like an African-American cameraman in a film. I think it's in the Scream films, where he goes, I'm not going in there. Have you seen any horror flicks? I'm the first one to go if I go in there. And they make a statement about these horror films and how these have certain
tropes,
characters who do certain trope. Yeah. Certain. I was trying not to use the word again, but it is the word. And when they reverse that and do something different, and the cameraman, like Ice Cube in Anaconda, lives, you're satisfied in such a different way, because you're like, yes, the black cameraman didn't die. Yes, I'm so happy. So when she turns and she goes, what happens to me? I thought that was a really smart move, because the audience is already 2 steps in front of all of these people. To take that moment and just turn it on its side, I think is really smart filmmaking. Cool. It seems insignificant probably to most people, but to me, I was like, that is really sharp. And I thought that was really great writing.
That's cool. So did you watch to the very end of the movie through all the credits?
Yes, of course I did.
Of course you did. It's so ingenious the way that they do that by wheeling in his body after everybody who's at this point of the podcast has hopefully seen it, so they know what happens at the end. You can kind of imagine what would happen at the end, but his charred body rolling into the morgue, and they get you to watch all of the credits, which is ingenious, because they're like, at any moment, and we're so conditioned by the Marvel movies and all these, movies where you've got the post-credit sequence, and then, you wait a couple minutes, or not even a couple minutes, you wait like 30 seconds, and then, okay, there's your payoff. But this movie just makes you sit in it. And it also, with all the stuff that's gone on in the movie, you pretty much are thinking, I'm thinking like, they are just taking the piss out of us. They are gonna leave it there, and they're just nothing's gonna happen. And you get to the very, very, very end, and then he sits up. So yeah, I thought that was well done.
I would have thought it was an epic fail if they actually showed that scene. If it wasn't a credit scene, I would have thought, oh no, don't do it. But because it was a credit scene and it was filmed like a security camera thing, and I also loved how he shot it where he knew where the credits were going to be running up. So right as the credits are smaller and then the guy sits up, you can see it. But throughout some of the credits, you can't really see what's going on there. And then the credits are on one side, on the left-hand side are, of course, straight up and down. So you see what the guy in the morgue is doing the whole entire time. And then when the credits get scrunched, he sits up. Well, they don't get scrunched, but they're smaller and whatever. Yeah. It's really cleverly done. And like I said, if that had been the tag after the credits or the mid-credit scene, I would have been like, okay, yeah, I knew that was going to happen. But because they chose to do it the way that they chose to do it, I was like, and if he hadn't sat up, I thought about this for a little while, maybe a little bit longer than most people might think I would think about something like this. But I thought about it for a little while. Would I have been satisfied if he hadn't sat up? I think the answer is yes.
I think I would have been too.
Yeah, because it would have been a clever twist on what you're expecting it. The fact that he did sit up, hopefully they'll do a reunion in 14 years, or actually that would be now.
Yeah.
Or maybe they'll do 2026, because this came out in 2006. So maybe they'll do the 20-year reunion and have all of the, what happened to Leslie Vernon, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably not a bad idea, actually, because we are definitely in the meta world where everything is turned in on itself. Speaking of credit scenes at the end of a Marvel movie, when you're expecting something and then Captain America comes on and lectures you about being a good person, and you're like, oh, that's the credit scene? That's not cool, dude. Don't do that. And he's making fun of you sitting there watching him.
That's right.
And you're like, oh, that's uncool, man. So bring back Leslie Vernon.
But no, so yeah, I think for me, if he wouldn't have sat up, then it would have been kind of like, yeah, of course this guy died. He was burned alive and he's a guy, so what do you expect? But really, by him sitting up, it reminded me that it's like, oh yeah, I've been watching a movie that's been in this universe that where Freddy is a reality, where Jason Voorhees is a reality, where Chucky, he even says Chucky, a baby doll that kills people is a reality. So why would he not survive that? It's just, it makes sense on both levels, but it's a good gimmick that actually paid off and became more than a gimmick, I think. So yeah, I liked it.
I'm glad that you suggested this film. It was fun. I couldn't watch a horror film right now if you paid me, but I could, but I don't want to. The world is hard enough right now. I want to see something that's going to enlighten my consciousness. But anyway, so it's good to have seen something that's tongue-in-cheek and fun, and it's about a serial killer. So lighthearted is not exactly the term I would use, but it's tongue-in-cheek. So thank you, because it actually was a stress reliever watching this film, because I forgot about the world for 2 hours. And that's, I think, the purpose.
All right. Well, you can check us out on the web at actorandengineer.com. You can go to facebook.com/actorandengineer, and you can tweet us at actorengineer. And we'll see you next time.